I'm reminded of the deeply touching letters, cards, and messages which so many of you have sent my wife and myself.
The halls of power rarely change hands without ceremony, yet this moment unfolded in hushed tones and sealed doors. While the world watched routine royal duties, King Charles quietly made a move no one expected, one that rewrote history overnight. No public abdication, no grand address. Just a silent transfer that placed William firmly at the center of the crown. So, why was it done in secret? What forced such urgency, and how long has this hidden shift been unfolding behind palace walls unnoticed? The Midnight Decree. Before the first light of dawn touched the skyline of London, a historic decision was quietly made inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, a decision that would alter the course of the British monarchy forever. King Charles III, facing the increasing strain of age, relentless duties, and a hidden but mounting health crisis, signed a secret decree granting Prince William the true reins of power. There was no public announcement, no parliament vote, and no ceremonial abdication. The act was invisible to the world, yet its consequences were monumental. By the time the city stirred to life, by the time Londoners walked the streets unaware of the drama unfolding just hours before, the kingdom had already shifted hands. William, the heir who had long trained for the throne, was now effectively running the country. The transfer was not a mere title change or a symbolic gesture. It was a carefully calculated move, a silent, deliberate maneuver to ensure the monarchy remained stable while protecting the king from the crushing weight of responsibilities that had begun to overwhelm him. The signing occurred just minutes before midnight in the king's private chambers, a room steeped in history, lined with portraits of ancestors who had faced their own monumental decisions. Earlier that evening, Charles had convened a secret emergency meeting with only his most trusted advisors. Every word spoken, every motion made was deliberate. There were no assistants, no staff, no formal record, nothing that would later appear on any schedule or in any official archive. This was a meeting designed to exist only in the shadows, a private theater where the fate of the monarchy would be quietly rewritten. Charles's hands trembled slightly as he placed the pen on the parchment, yet his eyes reflected a sharpness that belied fatigue. He understood the significance of the moment. The crown itself had not fallen. It had not been surrendered. But the burden, the relentless day-to-day demands of ruling, the ceremonial duties, the political pressures, had now been passed on to the next generation. William would handle audiences with heads of state, approve military appointments, and navigate the subtle currents of governance, while Charles retained the title and ceremonial presence of king. In effect, the monarchy had adapted to reality. The old guard would remain as a figurehead, while the future moved forward in action. It was a decision that required courage, foresight, and a willingness to bend tradition without breaking it entirely. In a palace accustomed to pomp, protocol, and public visibility, this quiet act of transfer was revolutionary. No announcements, no celebrations, no crowds witnessed it. Yet the implications were profound. As dawn spread its first light across London, Prince William was no longer merely heir. He had quietly assumed the reins of the kingdom, stepping into the destiny his father had long prepared him for. The crown itself had not tumbled from its perch, yet its weight now rested more heavily on William's shoulders. In the shadows of the night, history had moved silently, and the monarchy, timeless yet ever fragile, had taken its first step toward a new era. King Charles reportedly transferred rulership of England to his son, Prince William, in a historic and unprecedented move. But what triggered this sudden power shift? And is it legally justified? Now, let's delve into why the king could no longer rule. On the brink of collapse. Only hours before, King Charles III had hosted a long and meticulous diplomatic reception with senior leaders from across the Commonwealth. The room had been filled with polished smiles, courteous handshakes, and carefully measured words, the familiar theater of royalty and statecraft. Yet the moment the heavy oak doors closed behind the last guest, the facade of composure vanished. Charles staggered slightly, gripping the edge of a table for support. A sudden wave of dizziness swept over him. His breathing grew ragged and uneven, and his heart hammered in erratic bursts, as if warning of imminent collapse. Medical staff, already on standby in a nearby private room, sprang into action. Their movements were calm, precise, and unwavering. Professionalism sharpened to an almost cold efficiency. Vital signs were checked, neurological responses examined, and within minutes, urgent brain scans were reviewed. The diagnosis was grim and unavoidable. Vascular exhaustion had reached a critical threshold. The pressure on his circulatory system, combined with weeks of relentless duties, had brought his body to the brink. Doctors did not mince words. If Charles continued to operate at the pace demanded by his crown, a massive stroke was no longer a distant risk. It was inevitable. Yet the problem was not merely medical. It was constitutional. British law, with its centuries of tradition and centuries-old clauses, allowed a reigning monarch to surrender authority only under very specific conditions. If the ruler were fully incapacitated, unconscious, or declared unable to make decisions. Charles was neither. His mind remained alert, his judgment still sharp, but his body was failing him. This legal straitjacket left no easy escape. The choice before him was perilous. He could continue to shoulder the full responsibilities of the crown until his body betrayed him, risking not only his own life but the stability of the monarchy itself. Or he could devise a path that bypassed 1,000 years of tradition, a move so unprecedented that it had no formal precedent, no guide, and no guarantee of acceptance. To do so would require secrecy, courage, and the willingness to confront a system designed to resist exactly this type of intervention. By midnight, the decision had been made. In the quiet, shadowed halls of Buckingham Palace, Charles chose the second path. He would transfer real, functional authority to his son, Prince William, not through public announcement, not through ceremonial abdication, but via a secret decree that would preserve the continuity of governance while protecting the throne from collapse. It was a choice born of necessity, of foresight, and of a deep understanding of the fragile balance between tradition and survival. In that moment, the monarchy teetered on the edge of history, caught between the unyielding weight of precedent and the urgent demands of reality. And with a steady hand, Charles took the unprecedented step that would quietly, irrevocably, reshape the future of the British crown. The king was advised by medical experts to prioritize his health and prevent it from reaching a critical stage due to the demands of the throne. But who were the first people the king confided in? And what was their reaction? Let's find out. The Midnight Conspiracy. With the momentous decision settled, King Charles III summoned the only two people he trusted implicitly to safeguard the crown and the future of the monarchy: Prince William and Princess Anne. No aides were notified. No official records were prepared. The meeting was deliberately unrecorded. In the annals of history, it would not exist. It was a secret convening in the purest sense, a convergence of the kingdom's most loyal heirs under the shadow of crisis. The study was locked, completely soundproofed, and dimly lit by the warm glow of a single chandelier. Shadows played across the walls, falling over the solemn portraits of past monarchs who seemed to observe every action, silent witnesses to a moment that would test tradition, law, and loyalty alike. Charles moved slowly to the center of the room, placing a handwritten document on the polished mahogany table. It was not an abdication. It was something far more audacious and unprecedented. The decree spelled out a partial transfer of constitutional authority, carefully crafted to maintain the stability of the crown, while sidestepping centuries of rigid precedent. William would now assume real control over critical state functions, receiving foreign dignitaries, ratifying appointments, approving royal assent, and holding honorary military command. Charles would remain king in title, visible to the public, symbolically present, yet strategically silent when necessary. It was power without coronation, stability without surrender. William picked up the parchment and read swiftly, his brow furrowing as each line sank in. He immediately grasped the gravity of the move. Parliament would erupt in a heated debate, the press would explode with speculation, and there was one person, above all others, who would view this as an outright challenge, a direct assault on her own ambitions. "Camilla will never accept this," William said quietly, almost under his breath. His voice carried a weight of concern that filled the otherwise still room. Princess Anne, standing with her arms crossed in front of the fireplace, did not hesitate. "She won't see this as preservation," she replied, her tone sharp and measured. "She'll see it as erasure, a deliberate attempt to remove her from influence, from power, from history itself." A heavy silence descended. The tension was almost tangible. Everyone in the room understood the truth. Once this decree was enacted, the theoretical battle for the crown would become a very real war. And then, with no warning, no announcement, and no polite knock, the door swung open. Queen Camilla entered the room, her presence magnetic and commanding, cutting through the stillness like a lightning strike. The quiet, controlled deliberations that had filled the king's private chambers were instantly shattered. In the single, deliberate step, the inevitable confrontation had arrived. The war over the heart of the monarchy, the struggle between loyalty, ambition, and legacy, was no longer looming on the horizon. It was here. In that moment, the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Shadows danced across the walls, portraits of past kings and queens bore silent witness, and within the room, three figures stood at the edge of history, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The struggle for the crown had shifted from whispers and strategy into the full glare of confrontation, and the first move of this high-stakes battle had just been made. While King Charles was confiding in his son, Prince William, and his sister, Princess Anne, Queen Camilla entered without being invited. What could have brought her to such a critical moment? Could she have uncovered the king's plan? And would she accept it so easily? Now let's dive into the explosive confrontation. Queen Camilla unexpected strikes. The door did not merely open, it exploded into the room. No announcement preceded her arrival. No servant, no footman, no hesitation. Queen Camilla stepped inside as if she already owned the space, her presence immediately filling every corner of the study. The air seemed to shift, heavy with tension and unspoken warnings. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue silk, the fabric flowing like liquid authority, and a perfect string of pearls rested against her throat. Every detail of her appearance, her posture, her expression, her carefully measured steps, was designed not for love, but for power and command. Her eyes swept the room in a single, deliberate scan. First, they landed on the parchment clutched in William's hands. Then, they locked onto Charles. The verdict in her mind was instantaneous. She understood exactly what had been set in motion. "So," she said, voice smooth, almost casual, as she advanced toward the table, "you've decided to rule without me." Her steps carried authority, her tone carried menace. She reached Charles and rested her hand on his shoulder. It was not a gentle gesture, nor was it tender. It was intimate enough to intimidate, visible enough to serve as a public warning. "You cannot transfer power while you are alive," she continued, voice soft yet sharp, a lethal whisper in the charged room. To do so would reduce you to a puppet, and I refuse to be married to one. William opened his mouth to speak. Camilla silenced him with a glance that froze blood in the veins. "If the king is weak," she said, turning slowly to face them both, her eyes sweeping like a ruler appraising her domain, "then the queen must carry the burden. This is not ambition. This is stability." Her gaze returned to Charles. She leaned just enough to speak as if sharing a private concern, her words dripping with calculated care. "I want co-regency," she said softly, yet every syllable was weighted with demand. "I want real authority, equal power." Then the quiet threat emerged, measured and devastating. "If I am excluded," Camilla added, letting each word land like a cold hammer, "the king's medical records will be revealed by morning. The world will know its sovereign is mentally unfit. Parliament will panic. Markets will tremble. And this family will burn." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by degrees. Shadows lengthened across the walls, the portraits of past monarchs, silent witnesses to the escalating confrontation. Princess Anne stepped forward, her voice slicing through the tension like steel. "You are a consort," Anne said, deliberate and unwavering. "Not a sovereign. My mother never intended for you to be anything more." Camilla's hand tightened on Charles's shoulder. The king flinched, a subtle wince betraying the pressure behind the grip. "You need me," Camilla whispered, no longer concealing her threat. "William is untested. Anne is rigid. I am the only one who can control what comes next." In that instant, the private war for the monarchy erupted into the open. No longer confined to whispers, secret decrees, or shadowed corridors, it had begun in full force. And with that first strike, the Queen Consort had drawn blood. The battle for England's crown was no longer theoretical. It was alive, raw, and terrifyingly real. Camilla subtly rejects the king, transferring the leadership of the monarchy to William, giving reasons why she could also rule. But will her confrontation be limited to mere disapproval? Or is what lies ahead even more shocking and damaging? Now, let's unravel how Queen Camilla weaponized the press. The silent assassination. The attack didn't arrive with sirens, flashing lights, or the clatter of alarms. It arrived quietly, invisibly, and yet with the force of a surgical strike, through notifications. By dawn, London awoke to a shockwave, cascading across screens, banners, and front pages. King Charles critical. William forces father aside. The words cut through the city like a scalpel, precise, sharp, and orchestrated with near-perfect timing. Someone had aimed for the heart of the monarchy, for the vulnerability of perception itself. These were not speculative headlines, they were proclamations, deliberate verdicts delivered to a nation still half asleep. Anonymous senior palace sources painted a chilling portrait of the king. Confused, forgetful, barely functional. The most intimate details of his health, usually protected by the strictest confidentiality, had been laid bare. Brain scans, vital signs, and medical assessments were stripped of context, transformed into weapons of public judgment. The message was unmistakable. The king was finished, incapacitated, and dependent. And William? He was cast as the villain, the ambitious son, isolating a helpless father, seizing power under the guise of duty. Every word and image worked to dismantle him, line by line, character by character. At Kensington Palace, William read the reports in stunned silence, each paragraph striking like a blow to his reputation. His jaw tightened, hands gripping the tablet until his knuckles whitened. When he finally reacted, he threw it onto the breakfast table. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot, startling the staff and punctuating the fury that had been simmering within him. "She did this," he said, voice trembling with controlled rage. Only 4 people knew those details. Beside him, Kate Middleton remained calm, her presence a stabilizing force against the storm. "It's psychological warfare," she said softly. "She isn't aiming at Parliament or policy. She's poisoning the public's perception, and she's brilliant at it." Across the country, the narrative began to take root. Sympathy gathered around the devoted, protective wife. Suspicion and distrust coiled around the air. Every hour that the story lived in the headlines, William's legitimacy bled further. Each day, the monarchy itself appeared weaker, more fragile in the public eye. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla observed the unfolding chaos with quiet satisfaction. Afternoon tea became a strategic session with editors, political allies, and confidants. She refined the story, perfecting its timing and tone. "People fear sudden change," she said, measured and commanding. "Feed them that fear. Let the narrative spread." Orders were issued. Additional leaks, more insinuations. Doctors are now portrayed as fearing for the king's life, implying that only Camilla could safeguard him. Every decree, every word, every gesture from Charles was filtered through her. In doing so, she became the king. By evening, the first assassination had been completed. No blood had been shed. No sword had struck. Yet William's reputation lay shattered on the pavement, and the monarchy itself was bleeding in the harsh light of public opinion. Camilla explores the media to achieve her dream of regency when the king could no longer continue. But will she succeed? What countermeasures will the royal family employ to save the monarchy from the queen consort? Now, let's uncover the secret counter-coup to reclaim the monarchy from Camilla's grip. Princess Anne strikes back. Princess Anne did not rage, she mobilized. By the third dawn of the crisis, she had already dissected Camilla's plan with surgical precision. Isolate the king, poison the narrative, seize control through legal loopholes. Every move calculated, every pause deliberate. It was not emotion that drove Anne. It was strategy, honed from decades of observing palace politics and the unyielding weight of the crown. Anne would not allow a covert takeover. Before Camilla's network of loyalists could regroup, Anne quietly summoned Prince William and the Archbishop of Canterbury to Gatcombe Park, her private estate nestled far from the watchful eyes of the palace and its spies. No aides, no phones, no one who could be compromised. Here, strategy could breathe. Here, action could be taken. When William and the Archbishop arrived, Anne was already waiting. She said nothing at first. Instead, she placed an unloaded shotgun on the table, its metal glinting in the morning light, and began cleaning it with slow, deliberate precision. The sound of steel scraping against steel filled the room, punctuating the silent tension like the ticking of a bomb. "This is no longer a family dispute," Anne said at last, her voice cold, deliberate, and unflinching. "It's an attempted seizure of the crown." She laid out the plan with crystalline clarity. Camilla had lobbied influential figures within the Privy Council. Should Charles be declared incapacitated under existing law, Camilla would gain automatic power, a seat on the Regency Council as the king's spouse. One vote was all she needed to stall William indefinitely. A soft coup, legal, invisible, lethal. William rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his father's inaccessibility. "She controls access to father. I can't even speak to him without triggering another media firestorm." "That's exactly the point," Anne replied, her gaze unwavering. "She has weaponized time itself." Then the Archbishop spoke, calm and measured, delivering a revelation that shifted the entire board. "I have already drafted an alternative," he said quietly. "A decree based entirely on His Majesty's original intentions. A direct, partial transfer of power to the Prince of Wales, bypassing the Regency Council completely." Anne paused, her hands resting lightly on the gun, eyes narrowing. "But it requires one thing," the Archbishop continued. "A fresh signature, given willingly, with independent witnesses present." Anne's eyes snapped up, sharp as blades. "Then, tonight," she said, voice steely and resolute, "we take the palace back." She outlined the operation with military precision. Guard rotations would be altered under her authority as an honorary colonel. Loyal units reassigned. Questionable soldiers quietly removed. Camilla's surveillance net would be rendered blind. "We are not extracting the king," Anne emphasized. "We are confronting the lie." William hesitated. "She'll accuse us of treason." Anne smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of lips. "Let her," she said. "By morning, she won't have a throne to threaten us with." With a final click, the shotgun was secured. "This ends tonight," Anne declared, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "No leaks, no whispers, no more waiting." The counter-coup had begun. Princess Anne calls an emergency meeting attended by only 3 people to finalize the transfer of rulership to William. But what strategic move did she plan to adopt? And will it be successful? Now let's dive into how Anne and William executed the royal decree. The Midnight Judgment. Big Ben tolled 11, its melancholy chimes echoing through the stillness of London. Inside Buckingham Palace, the corridors were eerily silent, cleared with the precision of a surgical strike. Guards loyal to Princess Anne stood motionless, alert and unwavering. Power had already shifted within these walls. It simply hadn't announced itself yet. Prince William moved silently through a side passage, dressed in unassuming black, flanked by the Archbishop of Canterbury and 2 of the kingdom's top constitutional lawyers. There were no cameras, no crowds, no pomp. This was not a coronation. It was a trial, a reckoning. At the corridor's end, beneath the dim glow of a wall lamp, Princess Anne waited. She did not speak. She simply nodded toward the heavy oak door. "She's inside," Anne said, her tone clipped, "and she's recording." The revelation changed everything. There would be no secret signatures, no silent transfer. If this were to end tonight, it would do so in full view. "Open the door," William commanded. The hinges groaned under the weight of centuries as the door swung wide. King Charles lay propped against plush pillows, pale and exhausted. Instantly, Camilla rose, placing herself between the men and the king, as if she could physically shield the truth. "This is the king's private chamber," she snapped. "Remove them." No one moved. The silence in the room carried authority greater than any words. Anne's heels struck the marble floor with deliberate precision, each step a judicial gavel. "We are here to enforce the king's lawful will," she declared. William knelt beside his father, grasping his hand gently. "Father, we need to end this tonight," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Camilla retaliated, shoving a folded document into Charles's trembling hands. "Sign this," she demanded. "They're forcing you to abdicate." "Enough!" the Archbishop intoned, raising the cross on his chest. His voice was calm, absolute. "Your Majesty, Queen Consort, coercing a reigning monarch into signing a constitutional document without lawful witnesses constitutes treason under the Act of 1351. The word treason struck the room like lightning. Camilla froze, then pivoted into practiced despair. Tears streaked her cheeks as she dropped to her knees, clutching Charles's hand. "They want to erase you," she sobbed theatrically. "They want to humiliate us." Charles wavered, but Camilla's performance would not hold. "If you sign that decree," she hissed at William and Anne, "I will expose everything. I will declare him insane. I will destroy this dynasty." Anne stepped forward, her voice cold and measured. From her black leather briefcase, she withdrew a yellowed envelope, sealed with crimson wax. "You agreed to this," Anne said, holding it high. "The Sandringham Pact, 2005. Signed by you, witnessed by Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip." Clause 4 was read aloud, slowly, each word a tightening noose. Any interference with the succession would void the marriage, strip all titles, remove residence, and erase all status. No appeal, no mercy. Camilla collapsed silently. Then Charles sat upright, his eyes clear, his voice steady. "I was never confused," he said. "I was watching. You failed." He took the pen and signed the decree. William followed. Anne and the Archbishop witnessed the act. 11:55 p.m. The sentence was executed. Anne turned to Camilla. "You will leave. Tonight." 2 guards escorted her away. The oak door closed with a hollow finality. The echo of a courtroom emptied after judgment. The trial was over. The crown had ruled. Princess Anne and Prince William devised a clever plan at midnight to have the king sign a decree that would make William inherit the throne, leaving Camilla powerless to oppose it. But will the decree remain in the shadows, or will it see the light of day, leaving no room for rejection? Let's find out. The silent transfer. 7 days had passed since the storm in Buckingham Palace, yet the nation was fed only what it needed to hear. At exactly 6 p.m., the BBC cut into its regular programming, delivering a short, measured statement from Buckingham Palace. There was no flourish, no emotion, just the bare minimum of fact. Queen Camilla would withdraw from all public duties for health reasons and would relocate to a private estate in Scotland. The words were simple, almost mundane, but their implication was clear. The chapter was closed, the threat neutralized. Minutes later, a second announcement appeared, its tone carefully legal, almost dull, yet loaded with meaning. King Charles III had signed a special decree granting expanded constitutional authority to the Prince of Wales. The phrasing was meticulous, precise, almost bureaucratic, but there was no mistaking its effect. The day-to-day governance of the kingdom now rested firmly in the hands of William. The transfer was complete, yet invisible. There was no fanfare, no balcony ceremony, no oaths taken in public view. The handover of power had been executed quietly, decisively, and with a precision that only centuries of tradition could understand. That evening, on a cold, grey London night, Prince William stood alone on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Below him, the city moved unaware of how close it had come to unraveling. Traffic hummed in the distance. The bells of Big Ben tolled the hour, and the wind tugged at his coat. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply looked, surveying the city he now served in reality, even if not yet in title. Behind him, Kate stepped quietly to his side, placing a hand over his. No words were exchanged. There was nothing to say. This was not a moment of celebration, nor reassurance. This was a moment of acceptance, a recognition of the weight now resting on William's shoulders, the gravity of a monarchy preserved against the brink of collapse. He glanced at his phone. A single message from Princess Anne illuminated the screen. She has arrived in Scotland. Access secured. No return. He turned the screen dark. In that instant, the transition was complete. The monarchy had survived, not through spectacle, not through applause, but through decisive action and calculated patience. No crown had fallen, no dynasty had crumbled. The palace had been cleansed of threat, the illusion of control stripped away, and the future sealed by necessity. Historians would look back in decades, searching for the moment when power had truly changed hands. They would find no parade, no cheering crowds, no public declaration. They would see only a handwritten decree, signed at 11:55 p.m., a door quietly closing, and the subtle, unseen enforcement of centuries-old planning. And somewhere, hidden in the archives of the royal household, the Sandringham Pact would remain untouched, a silent testament to the foresight of a previous queen. It was proof that long before the crisis arrived, the kingdom had been safeguarded, ready for this precise, inevitable conclusion. The crown endured, the monarchy endured, and from the ashes of betrayal and intrigue, a new era quietly began. The passing of the throne by King Charles to William was announced, making it clear that Camilla would also leave the kingdom. But how will William likely rule? Will he maintain the status quo, or will he craft a new approach to govern? Now let's uncover William's vision for a new monarchy. The future king, With the crown now firmly in his grasp, Prince William steps into a role that is no longer symbolic. The quiet, decisive transfer of power has given him authority not just in title, but in reality. A rare and delicate opportunity for a monarch to shape the institution itself. Away from public ceremonies, media scrutiny, and the glare of tradition, William surveys the centuries-old monarchy with the precision of a strategist, questioning every custom, every unspoken rule, every precedent that has stood for generations. Insiders say he has little patience for the reasoning. We've always done it this way. To him, the monarchy must not be frozen in time. It must evolve, adapt, and endure. This is not about reckless upheaval or dramatic rebellion. It is about careful, deliberate reform, designed to strengthen the monarchy's relevance in a modern world while honoring its rich history. Every decision, every gesture, every public act will now carry the weight of intention and foresight. No longer just a symbol, William's authority is active, deliberate, and deeply personal. He will shape the monarchy not only as it has been, but as it needs to be. A resilient institution capable of balancing tradition with progress. In interviews and private conversations, William has made it clear that change is coming. It will not be abrupt or radical, but measured and thoughtful, aimed at ensuring that the monarchy remains both respected and relatable. From the way it engages with the public, to its internal traditions, to how it interacts with the media and the wider world, every aspect is being reconsidered. The monarchy will not stand still. It will move, adapt, and modernize, yet retain the dignity and continuity that have defined it for centuries. Even subtle elements of public perception are being reimagined. Small, carefully chosen gestures, strategic appearances, and deliberate statements will be used not to awe, but to inspire confidence. The monarchy under William will communicate, reassure, and demonstrate that it is alive, engaged, and capable of thoughtful leadership. It will no longer rely on the passive weight of history alone. It will earn its place every day through action, discernment, and vision. Yet authority carries responsibility. William understands that every choice, every reform, every public statement will carry consequences. The eyes of the nation, of historians, and of the world are already upon him. He must act decisively, yet wisely, balancing continuity with innovation, duty with personal judgment. This is the start of a new era. The monarchy has survived crisis, intrigue, and betrayal. Now, under William's leadership, it will evolve, not through spectacle or pageantry, but through calculated, deliberate action. Every decision will reflect his vision, a monarchy that is modern, relevant, resilient, and ready to face the challenges of the 21st century. The era of passive stewardship has ended. The era of William's reign, measured, confident, and decisively in control, has quietly, irrevocably begun. History will remember this as the moment when tradition met foresight and a new monarchy emerged, stronger, steadier, and prepared for the world it now governs. So, what do you think about King Charles passing the throne to William? Could he have set a new precedent in the British monarchy? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.